What's up everybody? In today's video, I am going to walk you through a Photoshop tutorial on creating thumbnails. Thumbnails are an essential part of making YouTube content because of click-through rate. When people see your video, you want them to want to click on it, and the only way to do that is to give them a positive first impression, which is through the thumbnail. So when people are searching for an answer to something on YouTube, your video comes up and their brain looks at yours and says, so today I am going to show you how I create thumbnails because I have received a lot of positive feedback from my peers and people within the content creator space on how I make these thumbnails, and I would love to share with you some of the things that I do to approach thumbnail creation. And again, this is a very subjective thing. This is just my approach, but I definitely recommend doing your own research. But I am going to show you how I'm going to take these assets and turn it into this. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we jump into Photoshop, I did want to just share some of the experience I have with this with my other YouTube channel, which is known as Murflex on YouTube, which is a gaming channel that I did a lot of content on Genshin Impact when it first launched for the first year. And I've kind of slowly drifted away from the gaming space, which kind of led me more into the creative space. As you can see here, some of these videos are my popular uploads. So this is one of my top videos here, and you'll see it actually has some very simple elements. It literally has 5 pictures of items that are within the game and then the name of the character, and it was enough. All of these things had some very simple elements instructed on them, but they all have some very common themes within them as well. And so I'd love to kind of share some of what I've learned from that and kind of help bring that over into today's video. So I hope that that kind of gives you some insight into where I'm coming from with all of this. I'm definitely not one of the biggest YouTubers in the world, but I definitely have had some experience on a smaller channel between having very, very small views, which obviously this one right here, 41 versus 63,000. So my goal is to help anybody be able to achieve the biggest success rate in reaching their audience. Let's go ahead and move over into Photoshop now. All right, now we're in Photoshop. I do use a reference when I work in Photoshop. So I have my Pure Ref here, which is a great application for references while you're working in digital art platforms. Definitely recommended. And then we're gonna go through this. I'm gonna try and keep it super simple because I've recorded this a few times and it's gone a little bit long. So I kind of wanna make sure to break this into pieces. We're gonna go ahead here and start with the background layer, okay? So the background is usually what I always start with, and I usually start with just a gradient. So you go here, pick your 2 colors, and usually like a darker and a lighter, and you kind of make it. And you don't have to make them too far apart. These are very, very close together values. So that's usually where I start. I'm gonna just do a kind of dark bluish purple to a light blue. And then I add a texture into play. Now this texture at start starts out looking like this. And the only things I change about it is the layer style, which is in this menu here. I changed it to overlay, and then I changed the opacity to 50%. Next piece is I've got the Photoshop symbol. So how we created this is a couple of things. We have a rounded rectangle, and that is right here. This rounded rectangle tool, hold shift, make a perfect square. And then you go into the layer style by clicking down here. And you would then add a stroke and then a gradient overlay. And you'd want the lighter side coming on over here. And then that is literally it. The only thing I added differently is you'll see this drop shadow that's involved, which is down here. And honestly, global light helps you because it just automatically puts the drop shadow based on where the light value is. And this is how you associate where the light value is. So as I move it, it changes it. So that can be helpful if you're doing drop shadows, which I personally like drop shadows. Sometimes I manually put them into pieces, but for the sake of starting, I definitely recommend using it if you want layers to look like they're on top of each other and that they are physically interacting, because technically lighting does create shadows. So something I recommend. You can also use an outer glow if you're ever trying to make something glow, or you can do an inner glow if you want this like little bar on the inside to kind of add some values. I have that set to a really strange value, so let me actually change it back to the default here. It's usually just this white blend mode for screen, and then you can change the size of it. And essentially this is just going to be a very, very subtle thing that you should barely even notice exists. So we'll just go ahead. And then you add the text, and then you can kind of adapt the text as needed and then group them together. Next part here, we have some textures happening. So think about this, I'm kind of going layer by layer from bottom to the top. So this next texture, and it doesn't always happen in this order, I'll just add. But this texture is just another one that I found on here, like this originally. And I'm gonna disable this mask. So this is what the initial image looked like. It had this weird little black dots here, and then it looked kind of like water going. So this is just stock footage, non-copyright free creative license use from pexels.com. Definitely a recommended resource for textures. And I was like, man, this would look really cool. So I'm gonna take it in here. And the first thing I wanted to do is I'm gonna, take a look at what it would look like on the background. So I changed it to like an overlay to see what it would look like. And then I'm like, oh, this doesn't really look that good here. So that's where I started adding a mask. Now how you add a mask is you go down here and you click this button whenever you have it on there. So if I delete this mask and add this one. Now what I typically do is I actually hit Alt backspace or Control backspace, depending on which one my black value is. And it goes completely away if it's black. Black conceals, white reveals. So now I have my white brush out, and as I click it, it will start revealing that image. Masks are incredible. That's why I love Photoshop. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just do this down here. And I kind of just want it over this, but I want to get rid of that little thing, mabob, whatever it is. And we'll just kind of go like this, okay? And I just think that the textures match really nicely because they've got some bubbles in it and stuff. But I don't like that the color profile is kind of adding this green yellow tint. So that's kind of where I added this black and white. And as you notice this black and white, how I did that is I go to this section down here and added black and white. And then I obviously don't want the entire thing black and white. So you hit Alt and click to make it a clipping mask, or you right click it here and hit create mask. And what that does is it makes the entire thing black and white for just the texture layer, which then associates the values kind of like the original ones, but it removes any kind of color values associated with it, and it just looks at, contrasted pixels versus non-contrasted pixels between black and white, which allows us to get this really nice kind of blended look where they look the kind of same from a color value perspective. So I'm gonna go ahead and just delete this one I added here. And then the next one is the thumbnail. So this is like the main event of our thumbnail, right? This is what it is all about. This is the eye catcher, the subject matter. And so for this, I just made an object. It could literally be a picture of a game. It could be a picture of a house. It could be whatever the subject matter of the video is primarily about. It's the important topic that you're going to discuss within the video. Whatever it is, I mean, I'm not going to go into how I made this just because it's not really important because your subject is going to be different. But essentially I just created something using all of the techniques I already just showed you, with using textures in the text, textures into a square, creating the objects like I did with the Photoshop thing, adding a circle, masking this little character in, and voila, have a thumbnail. That is how I created that. If you really care about that, I can go into it in a separate piece. And the next part is this arrow. So this arrow initially looked like this. It was a blue arrow I found, and I wanted it to be red. I feel like I have too much blue going on, not enough contrast. Now I could click this transparent layer, which locks the layer and its pixels, and I could just change it to whatever color. But you'll notice a lot of the values within it are getting wrecked by doing that. There's these inner shadows that you see in here, and this inner line right here that it gets rid of. There's like this gradient look. I don't want to lose all that. So what I did is I added a selected layer, and I went to a hue saturation layer, and I clipped it like I did with everything else. And then you can just move that selection. So for this one, I made it red. So what I did, came in here, changed it around, and you can change it to whatever color you want. And I like this color. I just think it looks nice. So go ahead here and play with the contrast values of it. I like that one. Maybe make it a little darker if I wanted to, like right here. And then maybe I'm like, I'm not really a fan of that, and I can change the color. So there's just so much creative control with this. So that's why I do it this way. And then the nice thing is, if I'm like, nah, I just don't like it, I'm not gonna do it, I can either just hide it, or I can just get rid of it. I'm gonna hit Control Z to bring it back, and then there's my arrow. And then outside of that, the last thing we're gonna do is add a border. Now how you can add a border on this is very, very easy. You need to make sure you have a layer that is open, a new layer. So clicking the little button here, new layer, take the square rectangle marquee tool. I'm gonna take it all the way throughout. Oh, let's make sure the whole thing's selected. You're gonna hit select up here, modify, and border. And then you're gonna do, I do 25 pixels, I think it's a safe value. And now from here, everything that's selected is everything outside of the square and a little bit on the inside as well. And I'm gonna hit Alt backspace to add whatever color I have selected there, it's black. And I'm gonna do it multiple times, and you'll notice every single time it like built up until it's got this nice solid black line. And from here, you can change it to whatever you want. So I'm gonna hit Control D to unselect, and I can go into the layer style. I can make it a gradient, I can make it a color, I can add inner glow, inner shadow. I mean, I can do tons of weird little things in here. For the sake of this video, I'm not gonna go into all that, but I'm gonna change the opacity here. Bring it down just to kind of show you there's some transparent ones you can do. And then you can also change how this looks here. And so I think I went with, I think I did a divide one, which I thought was really cool. And so that is how we made that. And so this is the end result, slightly different than what we originally had, but I think it looks great. And then the final touch is that when you are finished editing, you want to select all of the layers. And then from here, you can hold Alt and then left click and drag up above everything else. And then it's gonna keep everything you just copied and pasted selected. You can right click and merge them. Now from here, this creates a flattened image, and the reason you want to do this is, let's say you want to make some final touches, or you want to see what other balancing options you have. You can come up to filter and then camera raw filter. It's going to open up in a menu that has insane color preferences. You can just ignore anything outside of these lines because it will not export it this way. It only shows that because I do not have delete all pixels or all cropped pixels selected, because I like to move things around even when I'm not done, in case I get indecisive. From here, you can do a lot of different adjustments. You can do basic adjustments, curve, detailed, color mixing, color grading. Honestly, they all do very similar things. So it's like you can just pick one of them that you're comfortable with messing around with, or you've learned about, and you can, make your lights high. You can bring your mids up a little bit and stretch them away, because it looks like this is a pretty dark photo in general. Let's say that we want to just kind of even it out, right? So everything we're doing here, you'll notice all of these values are changing. Let's say I want to come down here to the very, very darkest one. I want to pull them down. I'm going to bring this up over here. So here we go. Right there. You can just make some subtle adjustments here and there and try to see if you like it. Now that's just a curve. This is probably the simplest way to do it, but you can actually go into very detailed pieces here. You can do color grading by hue and saturation. You can do it based on mid-tone shadows, optics, all sorts of stuff. But definitely recommend, this is a video for another time, but I wanted to share that with you. This is typically like the last step a lot of artists take with photos like this, just to get a desired look. Now, let's say you don't like it, you can always hit Control Z to even go back and forth. I actually don't like it as much as I like this, because this actually has some reds in there that I like. So we're just gonna stick with what we got. Now we're gonna do File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. I typically do 1920 by 1080, JPEG, very high. There's no point in doing any other file type, since it is going to be on YouTube and it'll most likely be compressed anyways. Honestly, I think this is a huge success compared to some of the other thumbnails I've seen out there. All right. That about does it, guys. So I hope this was helpful for you to kind of go through. I hope I was able to simplify some of this and go over some of the keyboard shortcuts I use, because I feel like those are always really, really helpful for me to hear from other people that use these tools, so that I can get better at using them myself. So hopefully you learned some things there. Like the video if you felt like it was helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you like more content on digital art in general. Good job sticking to the end of the video. That shows you really care about this stuff and you do want to learn more. And I will catch you guys in the next one.